Hello, and welcome to Introduction to Psychology. This presentation will continue our exploration of the topic of social psychology. The presentation begins by looking at a second topic central to social thinking, reasoning about the social world. That is the topic of attribution. Please attempt the exercise shown. Think of as many reasons you can for why the road might be so busy. There are many answers that you may have come up with. The road might be busy because it is rush hour. It might be busy because there is construction, or it might be busy because there has been a car accident. Whatever answers you came up with, in coming up with your responses, you have engaged in the process of attribution. Attribution is the process by which people use information to make inferences about the causes of behavior or events. That is, it is coming up with potential explanations for why things have happened or for why people have behaved the way they have. The first person to formally analyze how people attempt to understand the cause behind behavior was Gustav Ichheiser. The first person to formulate a general theory of attribution was Fritz Heider. His framework is called naive psychology, and it explains why people make attributions. The theory of naive psychology is based on the idea that people need to be able to understand the social world around them. If we can adequately explain why people are behaving the way they are, then we should be able to predict how they will behave in the future. Thus, the ability to make accurate attributions gives us a degree of control over events. Accordingly, people practice naive psychology all the time. That is, we constantly formulate common sense explanations for people's behavior. Because we practice naive psychology every day, we are generally quite good at it. Most of the time, our explanations for why people's behaviors are quite accurate. If they were not, we would not be able to navigate in the social world. Much of Heider's theory was based on the results of seminal experiments, such as his study of apparent behavior. In this experiment, participants were shown an animation of a large triangle, a small triangle, and a small circle that moved around a large rectangle with a hinged opening. In one version of the study, participants were simply asked to describe what they saw. In another version, participants were told to assume that triangles and discs were people and that the rectangle was a house. They were then asked what kind of people the shapes were and why they behaved the way they did. In the first version, all the participants except one interpreted the moving objects as being animals, either people or birds, and the rectangle as being a building. In the second version, the large triangle was consistently seen as a bully, the small triangle as a hero, and the small circle as a victim. And the movements of the characters were thought to be spontaneous if the shape moved first, but reactionary if the shape moved second. For example, the large triangle moving first, apparently spontaneously, towards the small circle was attributed to the villain being aggressive, while the small circle moving second, apparently in response to the movement of the triangle, was interpreted as the victim wanting to escape from the villain. This prior exercise illustrates a fundamental tenet of Heider's theory. That is, people tend to assign responsibility for others' behavior. We decide why people are acting the way they are. This is known as determining the locus of causation. Behaviors caused by a person's dispositions are said to have an internal locus of causation, while behaviours that are caused by situational conditions are said to have an external locus of causation. For example, if you see a man wearing a mask and decide that he did so because he is considerate, a disposition, then this would be making an internal attribution. If, on the other hand, you see a man wearing a mask and decide that he did so because it was mandated by the store, a situation, then this would be making an external attribution. Please attempt the exercise shown. Think of some reasons for why the woman drank too much. There are numerous possible reasons for why the woman drank too much. There are many possible internal dispositional causes. For example, the woman might be an alcoholic, she might be impulsive, or she might be irresponsible. Similarly, there are many possible external situational causes. For example, she may have had a difficult day, it might have been a celebration, or people might have pressurized her into drinking. Now consider this exercise. What would make you more confident that the cause of the woman's drinking was internal? What would make you more confident that the cause of the woman's drinking was external? These are questions addressed by Harold Kelly's covariation model. The covariation model is a theory outlining how people make attributions. According to Kelly, in order to assign responsibility for a person's behavior, in order to decide whether to make an internal or external attribution, we gather extra information. According to Kelly, people gather three types of information, and the attribution of responsibility that they arrive at, internal or external, is determined by the covariation between the three types of information. The first type of information gathered is consistency information. That is, we find out if the behavior always happens in the situation. So in our example, we would want to know if the woman always got drunk in the bar. The second type of information gathered is distinctiveness information. That is, we find out whether the behavior only happens in the situation. So, in our example, we would want to know if the woman only gets drunk in the bar. The third type of information gathered is consensus information. That is, we find out whether everyone behaves the same in the situation. So in our example, we would want to know whether everyone else gets drunk in the bar. According to the model, once a person has gathered consistency, distinctiveness, and consensus information, the attribution that he or she arrives at is determined by the pattern of the information gathered. If the observed behavior has consistency, but doesn't have distinctiveness or consensus, then an internal attribution will be made. The behavior will be blamed on the person. For example, in our example, if the woman is always drunk in the bar, she is drunk in other places as well, and no one else is drunk in the bar, then we are likely to blame the person. Being an alcoholic or impulsive or irresponsible seems the probable cause of her drinking. If the observed behavior has consistency, distinctiveness, and consensus, then an external attribution will be made. The behavior will be blamed on the situation. For example, in our illustration, if the woman is always drunk in the bar is the only place that she gets drunk, and everyone else in the bar is also drunk, then we are likely to blame the situation. Being in the bar seems to be the probable cause of the drinking. If the observed behavior doesn't have consistency, it has distinctiveness and doesn't have consensus, then an external attribution will be made. The behavior will be blamed on the occasion. For example, in our illustration, if the woman isn't always drunk in the bar is the only place that she gets drunk, and no one else in the bar is drunk, then we are likely to blame the occasion. A special occasion, such as it being the woman's birthday, seems to be the probable cause of her drinking. The attribution process is generally reliable. Because we practice making attributions every day, we are generally quite good at it. Most of the time, our explanations for people's behaviors are quite accurate. If they were not, we would not be able to navigate in the social world. However, we do sometimes make mistakes in our attributions, and some of these mistakes are common to everyone. These are known as the attribution biases. Attempt the exercise shown. Make an attribution for the 3 behaviors described. In this exercise, people typically put the driving behavior down to experience, the dress behavior down to slovenliness, and the phone behavior down to socialness. That is, they make internal attributions. They put the behaviors down to personal characteristics, skills, temperament, or attitudes. However, it is perfectly possible that the behaviors had nothing to do with the people's personal characteristics at all, but instead were dictated by the circumstances. For example, the 16-year-old might have sped through the school zone because she was rushing someone to hospital. The employee might have been forced to wear dirty socks because his washing machine was broken. Or the son might spend little time on the phone to his dad because his dad's house gets a poor signal. This example illustrates what Ross termed the fundamental attribution error. The fundamental attribution error is the tendency to overestimate the influence of dispositional factors and underestimate the influence of external factors on others' behavior. That is, it is putting others' behavior down to personal characteristics rather than to circumstances. This tendency was first observed by Ickheiser and is also known as correspondence bias, because it is the inclination to assume that people's behaviors correspond with their dispositions. The error is caused to a large degree by perceptual salience. That is, people performing actions draw attention and are easily observable, whereas background settings don't draw attention and are less easily observable. As a result, we typically accredit a person's actions to their inherent qualities rather than to the situation that they are in. A third topic relevant to social thinking, reasoning about the social world, is the topic of stereotypes. Stereotypes are sets of beliefs about the typical characteristics of members of groups or social categories. For example, the stereotype of cheerleaders is that they are physically attractive, but shallow and dim-witted. Please attempt the exercise shown. What are some widely held beliefs about jocks? What are some widely held beliefs about Asians? What are some widely held beliefs about business executives? In carrying out this exercise, by listing widely held beliefs about jocks, Asians, and business executives, you have described the stereotype of these groups. Stereotypes can be positive, negative, or ambivalent. Positive stereotypes are complementary beliefs about a social group. For example, the belief that Asians are hardworking and good at math. Negative stereotypes are insulting beliefs about a social group. For example, the belief that student athletes are unintelligent. Ambivalent stereotypes consist of a mix of complimentary and insulting beliefs about a group. For example, the belief that business executives are intelligent, but cold-hearted. Stereotypes vary in their accuracy. Some stereotypes hold more truth than others. Stereotype accuracy can be assessed by comparing people's beliefs about a social group with established facts about a social group. For example, the belief that Asians are academically gifted can be tested for accuracy by comparing the graduation rates of Asians to other groups. Accurate stereotypes are advantageous. They enable us to make correct judgments about people quickly without having to get to know them, and they enable us to behave in an appropriate manner towards these people. Inaccurate stereotypes are disadvantageous. They lead us to make faulty assumptions about people, and they place unfair expectations on the stereotyped group. Having looked at social thinking, reasoning about the social world, we can now explore social relations, how we connect with other people. One topic relevant to social relation is attraction. Attraction is the experience of evaluating another individual positively. It is liking someone. There are many factors that influence who we like. We tend to like people whom we have encountered often. This happens for two reasons. The first reason is the mere exposure effect. That is, the tendency to like things more the more you have been exposed to them. The effect occurs because people are naturally wary of strange things. We react with fear to novel things, but this wariness diminishes as we become more accustomed to them. Thus, the first time we see someone, we are very wary of them, but we become less wary of them each subsequent time we see them. The second reason that we tend to like people that we have encountered often is because we have had plenty of opportunity to get to know them and find out nice things about them. We tend to like people who have positive personality traits because they are satisfying to be around. Attractive personality traits include characteristics such as sincerity, honesty, loyalty, truthfulness, and trustworthiness. Unattractive personality traits include deceitfulness, maliciousness, dishonorableness, obnoxiousness, untruthfulness, and dishonesty. We also tend to like people who are good looking. This happens for three reasons. The first reason is that there is a widely held but false belief that beautiful people are nice people. The second is that we get status by association. Hanging out with beautiful people tends to make others think more highly of us. The third reason is that we prefer to be around healthy people, and if a person is beautiful, it suggests that they are also in good health. We tend to like people who are similar to us. The more things that people have in common, the more they tend to like each other. There are two reasons why similarity in values and interests is attractive. Firstly, similar people are validating. People who share our beliefs and interests reinforce the idea that our beliefs and interests are justified and worthwhile. Thus, we feel better about ourselves. And secondly, people who are similar to us are easy to get along with because we are less likely to disagree and argue with them. The fourth factor that can influence how likable we find another person is their regard for us. We tend to like people who like us. This occurs for two reasons. Firstly, we like people who like us because they boost our self-esteem. That is, they make us feel that we must have good, likable qualities. Secondly, it is reasonable to expect that people who like us will also be nice to us. Hence, we like people who like us because we expect them to, and they usually do, treat us well. Thirdly, we like people who like us because we believe in the unwritten rule of reciprocity, that we should give back what we receive. Thus, if someone likes us, we feel obligated to like them back.